All right, everyone, here we go. This will be my toughest task yet to get done under 15 minutes. So the 30 Years' War is the last of our religious wars. And so we had first the Schmuck Wars, the revolts in the Netherlands was the second religious conflict. The third were the French Wars of Religion, including the War of Three Henries. And now our fourth religious war and final religious war is the 30 Years' War. And certainly many people would argue that this war wasn't all about religion. The 30 Years' War, unlike the 100 Years' War, actually lasts 30 years. So we're into the 17th century here, 1618 to 1648. The 30 Years' War is the most devastating conflict in Europe outside of the two world wars. So it ravages the Holy Roman Empire where it is fought, and it does have long-lasting implications and problems for rebuilding and industrialization that will happen in future centuries for the people of the Holy Roman Empire. So if we look at the causes, the political causes, one, you have a fighting between the Protestants and the Catholics, not only for religion, but at this point they're fighting for power within the hundreds of states in the Holy Roman Empire. You also have these alliances, and we've talked about it before, but you've got Spain and the Holy Roman Empire Habsburg. So they're both the Habsburg family. At this point, Charles has given up his land to Philip, and so Charles doesn't control both the Holy Roman Empire and Spain, but they are both Habsburgs. And so they will side with the Catholics because the Spanish are always Catholics, the Habsburgs will always be Catholics. And then they're going to sandwich France. And France, even though they're Catholic, and will continue to be Catholic as we get into the Louis, they will side with the Protestants. And that has nothing to do with religion, as France is Catholic. They will do it because of power. And so your French have aligned, and your Scandinavian countries have aligned with your Protestants, and your Spanish and your Habsburgs have aligned with the Catholics. Religiously, and religion will spark this war, although the war certainly goes politically much deeper. The Calvinists were not recognized at the Peace of Augsburg. And so because the Calvinists weren't recognized, the princes were allowed to choose Catholicism, Lutheranism, and that's it. And you had many places who had large Calvinist populations and many princes who were choosing to make their state Calvinist, even though it violated the Peace of Augsburg. All right, so your causes are both political and then more immediately religious. So here's your empire of Charles V, Holy Roman Empire, southern part of Italy, Austria, and then your Spanish Habsburgs are over there in Spain, which will end up being Philip II. Your first phase of the war, and the war comes in 4 phases. It's an easier way to remember the war, but it will be the Bohemian phase. And so if you can see my cursor here, Bohemia is right here, and it's one of the states within the Holy Roman Empire. So this is what happens. Bohemia agrees to accept the Catholic Archduke Ferdinand. So Ferdinand is the new leader. So he replaces Charles, Ferdinand of the Holy Roman Empire, even though they are Calvinists. All right, so there's a huge number of Calvinists in Bohemia, but they have agreed to accept the Catholic Archduke Ferdinand as their emperor because he promises to let them keep worshiping Calvin, keep being Calvinist. He says, I won't try and re-Catholicize. I won't Catholicize you. I won't make it the majority religion. You just have to recognize me. No, that's a political ploy for him as the emperor. Excuse me. And he does that for a little while, but then he starts to make laws and rules outlying Calvinism and tries to re-Catholicize Bohemia. All right, so that's our first bit here. They accept Catholic Ferdinand as their emperor, but then he starts to re-Catholicize. So the Calvinists will throw 2 Habsburg governors, so 2 of Ferdinand's people, and a secretary out of a castle window. And these people will survive. So like we're talking castle like many stories up, like 4 or 5 stories up out of this castle window, and they survive. And so this is a big dividing line because they survive, and the Catholics say, well, it's an act of God. They survive because God saved them, and they believe in the Habsburgs. The Protestants say, nah, they survived because they fell into a pile of manure. So they fell into a pile of crap, and that's what they kind of think saved them. It broke their fall. Anyway, so the Bohemians will not recognize, after this, they will not recognize Ferdinand, we'll call him Ferd, as the leader, and they will elect their own Protestant leader, Frederick. Frederick V. So now you've got two sides. You've got Ferdinand, who will start his own Catholic League, and they have an army. And then you have Frederick, who will lead the Protestant Union. So all the Catholics in the Holy Roman Empire will follow Ferdinand and recognize him as the legitimate leader, and all of the Protestants will follow Frederick. And so it sets us up for battle. Fighting ensues between the Catholic League and the Protestant Union, and ultimately the Catholics win. They're going to defeat the Bohemian nobles at the Battle of White Mountain. Ferdinand is also going to take a bunch of land, declaring it's a hereditary possession, and pretty much take over Bohemia with the victory. The war does not end there, though, because we know that there's 4 phases. And your second phase is the Danish phase. So if you remember from two chapters ago, what religion is Scandinavia? And Scandinavia is Norway, Sweden, Denmark. Anyone? Oh, you've all told your computer screen or your phone that they are a Lutheran. That the Lutheran Church, very much a stronghold here in Scandinavia. So the Danish from Denmark, also quite a yummy breakfast food. The Danish phase is your second phase. King Christian, the Danish king, will try and help out his buddy Frederick and the Protestant Union. So he will take his army, he will march down into the northern part of Germany, or the northern part of the Holy Roman Empire, and will be promptly crushed by the Christian army. All right, a Catholic army led by a guy named Wallenstein will crush King Christian. It will also signal the end of Danish supremacy in the Baltic. So if we click back to the map quick, this Baltic Sea up here was really kind of the Danish ruled the Baltic Sea. Like they were the port in, they were the port out of the Baltic Sea, and they really controlled this region. After they get crushed by Wallenstein, who was a wealthy landowner, by his Catholic army under the leadership of Ferdinand, they will no longer be important in the Baltic region. All right, so at the end of this phase, phase 2 goes to the Catholics as well. So phase 1 was won by Ferdinand and the Catholics. Phase 2 was won by Ferdinand and the Catholics. But at the end of this phase, Ferdinand kind of wants to say na 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 na, and he issues this Edict of Restitution. The Edict of Restitution prohibits Calvinist worship, and it says that all of the land that has been taken from the Catholic Church in the last 75 years by any Protestants needs to be returned. So he says, you guys are losers, you can't worship, and you have to give all your land back, which means all the princes lose their power. Well, they're certainly not going down easily. This was really stupid, probably on Ferdinand's part, because Ferdinand, he should have just been happy that he won. So this gets the Swedish involved. All right, so first phase was Bohemia, won by the Catholics. Second phase was the Danish phase, won by the Catholics. Third phase is the Swedish phase. Now this guy, Swedish king, Gustavus Adolphus, and you recognize him because the college in southern Minnesota was named after him, Gustavus. He is the Swedish king, and he really decides that he needs to help the Protestant Union. Now, he is credited with a military revolution, and it gives it a little bit of time in your book, but it is a pretty important idea. This idea of military revolution. The Swedish army, under the leadership of Gustavus, has the first conscripted army. And the conscripted army, or a conscripted army, is one that's been drafted. And so it's huge. They have a much more mobile cavalry because they put their soldiers on horses. They also use gunpowder, and they don't follow the traditional rules. And so if you think of like Civil War fighting, you think of like everyone lining up and they're firing one row at a time. He did not believe in this. It was more of a free-for-all for him. That he had smaller, much more dynamic brigades that would fight. They had a bigger box formation, and they would attack, not following all of the traditional rules that had been employed before. So they have a lot more artillery, but they have a lot lighter. They're just much more modernized army, and it's a lot bigger because they conscript or draft their soldiers. So Gustavus Adolphus is credited with this military revolution, more for conscription and mounted foot soldiers than anything else. And so initially, it works. That at the Battle of Lutzen, it is a Swedish victory. They're able to kind of protect their ports and defend themselves, and then he's killed. Gustavus is killed at the Battle of Lutzen, and it all goes downhill. The Battle of Nördlingen ends with a Ferdinand victory. That's about a year and a half later in 1634, and it is a Ferdinand Catholic victory. And at this point, the Holy Roman Empire is pretty much ravaged, and Ferdinand wants peace. So in order to try and negotiate a peace, he annuls the Edict of Restitution. However, at this point, Ferdinand is really a victor. He is defeated within his own Bohemia and other Protestants within his own country or empire. He's defeated the Danish, he's defeated the Swedish, and who is afraid? At this point, Louis XIII can't sleep at night. Granted, the kid's like 10 at this point, and so he's sleeping fine, and his Cardinal Richelieu is the one not sleeping at night. But France is not going to allow Ferdinand to become kind of this undisputed ruler of Europe. And so France wants in. So the Swedish army, the well-equipped, well-trained Swedish army, just lacks leadership. They're all hanging out, eating the food and sleeping with the women of the Holy Roman Empire and the land that they're kind of ravaging at this point and just living off of. So France uses those soldiers and their own soldiers, and that's why it's called the Franco-Swedish phase. Now, at this point, we know that it has nothing to do with religion, and we know that I only have 4 minutes left, so I need to hurry, which just means I'm going to talk faster, not actually say any less. The Franco-Swedish phase has nothing to do with religion because the French are Catholic. And they don't really even tolerate Protestantism at this point anymore. They're annulling the Edict of Nantes. So the Franco-Swedish phase means there's nothing to do with religion because the French, the Catholic French, are on the same side as the Protestants in the Holy Roman Empire. So there it is, little to do with religion, and the French, they do more of the fighting of the Spanish in the south, and the Swedish kind of continue on the fighting within the Holy Roman Empire. The French will decisively defeat the Spanish. Philip has spent his way, he's spent through his mountain of silver at this point, and his army is old, and the French army is just better. And it ends Spain's military greatness. Their naval greatness ended with the Spanish Armada and the defeat of the Spanish Armada. And so Philip is now kind of dwindling all his resources, and the Spanish are no longer going to be dominant, and we're going to stop talking about them shortly. The fighting will end, and the official end to the 30 Years' War is the Peace of Westphalia. And the Peace of Westphalia is another one of those dates that are important. So our first date was 1517. What happened then? Yep, Luther nailed his theses. And our next date, is the Peace of Westphalia, 1648. So those are our first two dates that we're going to remember so we have some context. The Peace of Westphalia will end the most destructive conflict in Europe until World War I, and it will be a turning point in European politics. Right? It will signify a change in power from the Spanish to the French. Now the Dutch are dominant, yes, the Dutch are fairly dominant because of their trading empire. The English will start to get dominant because of their trading, but in continental Europe, so in the continental non-cross the English Channel part of Europe, the French will dominate and Paris will become the center of Europe. They will gain some land, Alsace and Lorraine, which is the western part of the Holy Roman Empire. They will officially dissolve the office of the Holy Roman Emperor, and so those princes, those Protestant princes and Catholic princes of the Holy Roman Empire will be in full control of their states. There will be over 300 independent states with the power to conduct their own foreign policy. That is an issue because 300 independent states are very susceptible to invasion. But whatever, we'll do that later. And then an end to Spanish domination. And so your Habsburgs, they will not dominate the Holy Roman Empire anymore because there's no office of the Holy Roman Emperor. They will move east, yep, that's the direction, east, to dominate Austria. And so it's now your Austrian Habsburgs. Yes, the Spanish are still Habsburgs, but then in the Holy Roman Empire, the office and that hereditary title will move east and they will dominate Austria. Other things that happen quickly, Switzerland and the Dutch will remain independent and will get their independence because the Spanish are no longer involved. And religious toleration will now be issued for the Calvinists as well. And the last thing is the official separation of religion and politics. The Pope will no longer have influence over politics. Not at all, not in Europe, only in the city-states in Italy. 25 to 30% of the population will be lost due to war and famine during the Holy Roman Empire. And I have 5 seconds left, so we will talk about this in class on Monday. Thanks for listening.